You know what hurts the most? When your own family throws a wedding in your childhood backyard and acts like you were never part of it. I didn't fight. I didn't make a scene. I just showed up. With the letter my father left me, the cufflinks he gave me, and the key that unlocked everything they tried to hide. I've lived through 3 years of silence, and still I walked back into that yard with nothing but my name and the truth he left behind. If you've ever felt invisible to your family, this story will show you how one quiet moment can reclaim decades of erasure. Stay till the end. You'll understand how peace comes not from being seen, but from knowing who you are. When the lawyer read my father's final words to the daughter who stood in quiet loyalty, no one clapped. They just stared. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. And if you skip this, you might miss the one reminder you need today. You were never forgotten. You just needed someone to finally say it out loud. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. I hadn't heard from Heather in almost 3 years, not since that cold afternoon in Dad's hospital room when she stood by the window scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. We hadn't fought, not out loud anyway. That was the thing about my family. Our silence always screamed louder than our words. So when the wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in late May, my first instinct was to toss it in the recycling bin. The envelope was thick, creamy, with gold lettering that tried too hard. My name, hand-lettered in perfect script, looked like it belonged to someone else, someone still invited, someone who hadn't been quietly trimmed from the family photo. I held it in my hands a long time before opening it. The card inside smelled faintly of lavender and money. There was no mention of Dad, no acknowledgement that this was the first family event without him. Just dates, locations, a list of hotels, and a note about the dress code, garden elegant. I wasn't sure what that even meant. I wore simple clothes now, comfortable things. Dad always said comfort was a form of honesty. The phone rang just after noon. I let it go to voicemail, then checked it anyway. Aunt Carol's voice spilled out, syrupy sweet. "Hi, honey. Just making sure you got Heather's invitation. She was so glad we tracked down your address. Anyway, it'd be lovely if you could come. Just keep the daylight, you know? No tension. Let's keep things peaceful, yes?" I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the card. Peaceful, she'd said. As if my presence was the storm. As if grief was something best kept quiet, or better yet, absent. I made tea that afternoon just to have something to do. Outside, the sun poured through the kitchen window, casting golden squares on the worn tile. I watched the steam rise from my mug and thought about Dad. He would have hated the formality of this wedding. He used to joke that love didn't need flowers flown in from Ecuador to prove itself. A handshake and a promise were plenty. Part of me wanted to skip the whole thing. Let them have their curated weekend, their speeches, their posed smiles. But something about the invitation, about seeing my name, about the glaring omission of his, itched at me. Like a scab I wasn't allowed to touch. In the back of my closet, tucked inside an old shoebox, were the cufflinks Dad gave me the Christmas I graduated. Silver ovals, etched with a tiny compass on each face. "So you never lose your way," he said. I hadn't looked at them in years. I slipped them into a velvet pouch and held it for a long moment, the cool weight of memory settling in my palm. Then I whispered, "For me, Dad, not them." I folded the invitation and slid it back into the envelope, leaving it on the counter like an answer waiting to be mailed. Heather's wedding looked like it had been pulled straight from a magazine spread, every detail carefully arranged to feel effortless. Lavender centerpieces lined the aisle, pale purple ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and even the ice cubes in the lemonade dispensers had tiny edible flowers frozen inside. It was picture perfect. Down to the way the sun filtered through the canopy of old oaks that shaded the backyard. the same backyard where we once buried a time capsule and built forts out of moving boxes. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a set. I stood near the folding chairs for longer than I should have, unsure where to sit. My name wasn't on any place card. The usher, a cousin I barely recognized, gestured vaguely toward the back row. By the time I got there, a toddler had taken the seat with my name. His mother looked up at me, shrugged, and said, "He's cranky when he's moved." I nodded and stood. The ceremony began with soft cello music and whispers. Heather appeared at the top of the makeshift aisle in a flowing white dress, her hair curled into perfect waves, her expression calm and collected. She looked beautiful, I'll admit that much. Derek beamed at her as if he'd just won something. Maybe he had. I stood beneath a magnolia tree, half shielded from view, half hidden on purpose. When Heather began her vows, she paused at the line. To everyone who stood by me through the hardest times, and looked directly at Aunt Carol. She didn't even glance in my direction. Her voice caught, just slightly, perfectly timed. Guests sniffled. Someone dabbed at their eyes. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The applause came quickly once the vows ended, light and polite. A string quartet resumed, playing something delicate and forgettable. As the crowd began to mingle toward the reception tables, I caught a voice behind me. Derek's, unmistakably smug. At least she didn't bring drama, yet. I turned just enough to see him laughing with two groomsmen, his drink sloshing slightly in one hand. He didn't see me, or he did, and simply didn't care. A breeze stirred the hem of my dress. Black wasn't exactly garden elegant, but it was what I had, and what I needed. My quiet nod to Dad. No one said a word about it, but a few looks lingered longer than they should have. The kind of looks that speak in low tones, the kind that imply you've made a scene without doing anything at all. Emma, my cousin's daughter, peeked up at me from behind her mom's skirt. She was small, with a mop of curly hair and a flower crown slipping to one side. She didn't say anything, just looked. Kids can see more than we give them credit for. As I stepped away from the crowd, the chatter thinned. The laughter faded behind me like static lowering on a radio. That's when I saw him. Mr. Lorne, Dad's lawyer, stood beneath the shade of an old maple tree near the edge of the garden. He wasn't talking to anyone, just watching. When our eyes met, he gave the smallest of nods, barely noticeable. I didn't smile back. I just reached into my bag, feeling the velvet pouch with the cufflinks tucked inside. Still cool, still waiting. I turned toward the old chapel at the property's edge, where the lawn faded into gravel and the light grew quieter. It had been closed up for years, but I remembered where the key used to hang. Some doors, even if they've been locked a while, still remember how to open. The chapel hadn't changed. The same crooked cross still hung over the altar, slightly tilted like it always had. The air smelled of pine and old varnish, and the light pouring through the stained glass windows had that soft golden hue only late afternoons in June can offer. I stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. It felt strange, being there without Dad. We used to sneak in here during family gatherings when things got too loud. He'd sit in the front pew with his elbows on his knees, head bowed, not in prayer exactly, just resting. He once told me that silence was a kind of medicine if you let it work, and for a while, it did. I walked slowly down the center aisle, my footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. Dust danced in the sunlight, and the hymnals still sat neatly in their slots, untouched. On the far wall, just above the piano, hung a photo I hadn't seen in years. It was of me and Dad rebuilding the porch. He had a screwdriver in one hand and a lemonade in the other. I was 14, sunburned and grinning like I had all the time in the world. I moved closer. The frame was slightly loose at the corner. I slid my fingers along the back and felt it, the edge of something taped there. My heart quickened. Carefully, I peeled back the backing. A plain envelope fell into my hand. For Lauren, it read, in his handwriting. I sat in the front pew and opened it with trembling fingers. The letter inside was short, just a single page, folded neatly, the paper slightly yellowed around the edges. He wrote about regret, about the way things got away from him. He said he knew the others had pushed me out, that he didn't fight hard enough when it mattered most. He wrote that I was never forgotten, never unworthy, just inconvenient in a world they wanted to control. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say goodbye properly, but I left something for you. You'll find the key where we left the world behind. It's still there, and so is the truth. I read it twice, then a third time, even though the words had already carved themselves into me. The tears came slowly, not from grief this time, but from the strange comfort of being seen, of knowing I hadn't imagined it all. I wasn't just forgotten. I had been erased, deliberately. And Dad had known. He'd tried, in his quiet way, to leave a light on for me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My fingers lingered on the crease. It felt heavier than paper should. As I stepped outside, the sky had begun to shift. The warmth of the day was fading, the air tinged with something softer. A breeze moved through the willow tree near the edge of the yard, and there, beneath it, stood Mr. Lorne. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just waited, his hands clasped behind his back. "We should talk," he said, voice low, steady, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel alone. The study was supposed to be off limits for guests. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Staff use only," but the handwriting wasn't Dad's. His writing had character, tight curves, clean lines. This was rushed and impersonal, like the kind of thing Aunt Carol would scribble and call thoughtful. I waited until most of the guests had drifted toward the back lawn for speeches and cocktails. A string quartet played near the gazebo, their music floating through the open windows. The house felt different now, less like a home, more like a venue. But the creak in the hallway floor still groaned beneath my steps, just like it always had. I pushed open the study door and slipped inside, closing it gently behind me. The air was still. Dust motes shimmered in a slant of light breaking through the curtains. Shelves were stacked with wine glasses, napkin holders, crates of sparkling cider. But beneath the clutter, I could still see pieces of him. The old bookshelf with faded paperbacks. The coat hook he carved himself. The indentation in the rug where his desk chair used to roll back and forth. I crossed the room and dropped to my knees in front of the desk. It had once belonged to his father and had a drawer that stuck if you pulled it too fast. I remembered how we used to store little things inside. Matchbooks, baseball cards, handwritten grocery lists. Things that didn't matter to anyone else but felt like anchors to a life we built one small habit at a time. The drawer opened with a soft groan, and there it was, tucked behind a photo frame of us on the front porch, the one where I was holding a hammer twice the size of my hand and grinning like I'd built Rome. I slid the frame out of the way and saw the small brass key taped flat against the wood. My breath caught as I peeled it free. It was cold in my palm, heavier than I expected, real, tangible. Dad's words echoed in my mind. It's still there, and so is the truth. Beneath the key was a second envelope. It wasn't addressed to me. Instead, in the same neat lettering, it said, "To be read with Mr. Lorne." I didn't open it. Not yet. I tucked both the key and the envelope into my purse and let the weight of them settle against my side. The door behind me creaked softly. "I figured you might end up in here," Mr. Lorne said. I turned. He stood just inside the room, his expression unreadable but kind. No tie, sleeves rolled to his elbows like always. He looked like a man who'd spent the day waiting for something that finally arrived. He made sure someone knew, he said, just one. I didn't say anything at first, just nodded once. A quiet agreement, a vow. "It's time," I said. Outside, a clink of glass rang out. The first toast had begun. Laughter floated in, light and hollow. I looked around the room one last time. The books, the wood grain, the smell of paper and time. It didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like resolve. I followed Mr. Lorne out and closed the door behind me, not softly, not gently, just firmly enough to know it wouldn't swing back open on its own. Heather stood by the fountain with a glass of champagne in hand, smiling the kind of smile that photographs well. Her dress shimmered faintly in the twilight, and the flickering string lights gave everything a soft, curated glow. She looked like a magazine cover, calm, elegant, centered. She thanked everyone for coming, thanked the caterers and the florist and the friends who flew in from Charleston. She thanked Aunt Carol for holding the family together and Derek for always believing in her. But not once did she say Dad's name. I stood near the edge of the crowd, just close enough to hear but far enough to remain invisible. My hand rested on the velvet pouch inside my purse. The cufflinks were still there. So was the key. So was the letter Mr. Lorne now held in his inside jacket pocket. The guests were arranged in a crescent around the fountain. They clutched champagne flutes and wore linen jackets, gauzy dresses, pastel shoes that had never touched real soil, the kind of people who smiled easily and avoided discomfort like a draft through an open door. Heather raised her glass. "To the future," she said, her voice clear and rehearsed. "To love and to every person who helped us get here." She paused, eyes shimmering just enough to be convincing. "We wouldn't be standing here without you." That was when Mr. Lorne cleared his throat. It was a small sound, precise, professional. But it cut through the applause like a pin dropped into still water. "If I may," he said, stepping forward. "Before we conclude, Robert Callahan left an addendum to his will. He asked that it be read today with those he once called family present." The silence fell hard. Heather's fingers tightened around her glass. Derek shifted, just barely, and I saw his mouth press into a line. Aunt Carol blinked rapidly, like someone trying to dislodge a speck of dust that wasn't there. Mr. Lorne unfolded the letter and began to read. "To my daughter," he said, his voice steady. "The one who stood in quiet loyalty, even when her presence was no longer welcome. The one who held space when others tried to erase her." People turned their heads toward me. "I leave the house she called home. The accounts I protected from careless hands. The memories we built before ambition clouded love." Heather's lips parted. No sound came out. "To those who stood only in proximity, not in spirit," Mr. Lorne continued, "I leave nothing. No explanation, just the clear removal of names and access, so that what remains can finally be whole." Aunt Carol dropped her napkin. "This can't be real," she whispered, but no one answered her. The air felt different now, thick with something heavier than heat. A few guests lowered their glasses. Others stepped away from Heather, not dramatically, just enough to create space. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Mr. Lorne folded the paper and looked at me, not for approval, but recognition, the kind you give someone who's been standing still for too long. There was no applause, no outburst, no challenge, just a long, drawn-out quiet. And in that quiet, the music stopped. Even the wind, which had stirred the edges of the linen tablecloths a moment before, seemed to pause. Everything waited. I didn't wait for their excuses. I didn't need them. The reception had thinned into fragments. Half-empty glasses, wrinkled napkins, and polite laughter stretched too far. The garden lights flickered faintly now, their glow paling against the deeper dark that had begun to settle over the yard. Someone had turned off the music. No one noticed. I moved slowly, gathering my things from the corner chair where I'd left my shawl and purse. A few guests glanced my way. This time, they didn't look through me. One woman nodded, a quiet gesture that said more than any speech. Another gave a small, sympathetic smile. I didn't return it, but I saw it. The scent of cut grass still lingered in the air, mixed now with the faint char of sparklers long extinguished. Somewhere nearby, a child yawned. Somewhere else, champagne fizzed softly in forgotten glasses. Emma found me near the fountain. She was barefoot now, her flower crown gone crooked again. She held something small in her hand, and without a word, she reached up and pressed it into my palm. "You dropped this," she said. It was a silver button, one I hadn't even realized had slipped from my dress. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded, then ran off without waiting for more. Just like a child, just like someone who still believes small things can matter. At the edge of the reception tent, Aunt Carol stepped into my path. Her arms were folded, her mouth set in that familiar, practiced line between concern and control. "We should talk," she said, her voice brittle. I didn't stop. I didn't speed up either. I walked past her the same way I'd walked through this entire day, quietly but with purpose. Let her call it disrespect. Let her frame the silence however she needed. That was her language. Mine didn't require translation anymore. Near the gift table, I paused. Heather and Derek weren't nearby. I imagined they were still inside, trying to rewrite the moment that had unraveled their stage. Maybe they were rehearsing what to say to guests next, what to post, what to delete. I pulled the invitation from my purse, the same one with my name written in gold script. I uncapped a pen and wrote 3 words across the back in small, steady handwriting. I was here. Then I placed it gently on the table among the glittery gift bags and crisp white envelopes. No one saw me do it. That wasn't the point. I made my way through the backyard gate and toward the gravel driveway. My car waited at the curb, quiet and patient. As I pulled away, the chapel lights in the distance flicked off one by one. The building disappeared into the night like a sigh. Behind me, the reception buzzed faintly. Fewer voices now, thinner laughter, a sound already forgetting itself. Up ahead, the road stretched long and open beneath the dark Carolina sky. I didn't look back. Sometimes, the loudest way to speak is simply to walk away with your dignity intact. That night, I didn't leave with anger. I left with the truth in my pocket and peace in my chest. Families don't always get it right, but in a world that moves too fast, remembering who you are and who stood quietly by your side can mean everything. Forgiveness doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes it's just choosing to keep your story whole. If this story stirred something in you, I invite you to share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've reclaimed your voice, quietly or boldly.